recording on Wednesday, March 29th, 2023 at 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Patrick Moore and Mr. Robert Spencer. Both have been on here individually, and this is a hybrid episode. And guys, if you want to support the podcast, you're watching on Rumble, click that little red button. That's Locals. That's Rumble's version of Patreon. You can go support the show for a couple bucks a month, exclusive content, promo code Tommy. And if you don't want that and you want some merchandise, I do have my own crazy graphic designs that I put on hoodies. That link is in the description as well. But enough of these selfish plugs. We both, I think, so Dr. Moore came on here and we talked about your book about, kind of fake or like amplified catastrophes and how the green movement, and for anyone that doesn't know, Dr. Moore is the co-founder of Greenpeace. The green movement is more of a power grab, and Mr. Spencer and I wrapped our podcast up last time philosophically, among other things. Also, though, do the elite really believe in this kind of eco catastrophe, or is this just, I didn't even realize that water bottle was in the camera, or do they just want to use this as a power grab? And I couldn't think of a better two people to pair together with this. So, Dr. Moore, could you maybe throw your two cents in, and then Mr. Spencer, and then we can just kind of bounce you two off as I sit here and nod like a peon?
Well, I always start with the fact that every molecule of CO2 we are emitting from burning fossil fuels and making concrete came from the air and the atmosphere in the first place. It was all sucked up by life and put into deposits either as fossil fuels, which are made from, coal is made from trees and forests, and oil and gas are made from marine life that went to the bottom and got locked up there. And all of the shellfish are responsible for making 100 million billion tons worth of carbon in limestone and other life-created rocks. And that makes them unavailable. The only place CO2 is available is in the fluid parts of the earth, which is the atmosphere and the oceans. And that has been removed in vast quantity over the ages. And everybody's going on as if we're making CO2 higher than it ever has been in the history of the earth, when in fact it's still like not even 10% of what it was when multicellular life appeared. I mean, in the Cambrian period, what they call the Cambrian explosion of life, when multicellular life began, then they learned to make shells for themselves out of calcium and carbon dioxide, and that's been lost. The whole of the cliffs, White Cliffs of Dover, are made from the shells of coccolithophores, which are a phytoplankton that photosynthesizes and has a shell. And the idea of taking a soft body like a jellyfish and putting a hard shell around it, it does a lot to protect it from predation. I mean, it's a major step in the history of life, is creating shells in marine organisms. And there's land turtles have sort of done the same sort of thing. Mammals and birds are sort of the opposite. Our skeletons are all inside us, so they don't protect us in the same way. But we can run, and that helps. But clams can't run. So, anyways, that's my introduction. That every single molecule of CO2 we are putting in the atmosphere, that's where it came from in the first place. So why not put some back? I can't see how that could possibly be changing the status quo in any negative way.
And Mr. Spencer used to advise the FBI on extremists and extremist nature. And I can only imagine that we are all digging ourselves a hole and we are becoming eco-terrorists with every second that this podcast goes on, that we are now being your work is being used against you. They are spinning up the supercomputers at the Department of Homeland Security, and they're going to look at these terrorists talking about phytoplankton like it's nothing. But your thoughts on all of this, Mr. Spencer?
Yeah, this is great because I don't know anything about any of that. And just to hear that, I think that makes so much sense, what you just said. I don't know anything about it, but it seems to me to be self-evident when you set it out in this way that this is the situation, that the apocalyptic hysteria that we are getting from the elites is not similarly sensible or sound when I hear it. And so I appreciate the facts and the information that you've just given us. And it seems to me that it's obvious that, going back to your opening statement, Tommy, that the elites do not believe in their own nonsense, because everything that you said was just so clear and compelling and made so much sense. I can't imagine that these guys like Barack Obama or Soros or anybody else you want to name, that these simple facts elude them if they have looked into these matters at all. And like I said last time when we were talking, it seems to me obvious that they do not believe what they're saying when they buy these lavish beach houses on land that's supposedly going to be underwater any minute now, really. You know, Miami was supposed to be underwater, what was it, in 2010? And so we're late. And I can't imagine that if Barack really thinks that Martha's Vineyard is going underwater, he would have plunked down the money for his place, or his place in Hawaii, or Joe Biden's taxpayer-funded walled beach house in Delaware. All of them indicate that they really know that what's being said here is true. They just don't want us to know.
Dr. Moore?
Yeah, one more little point. The sea level is rising approximately 1.5 to 2 millimeters a year. So I have two things to say about that. First, you won't have to run. It's not going to inundate you at any time soon. And secondly, if you really want to stop the water from coming in somewhere, hire the Dutch. 25% of their country is below sea level. And they've done that with engineering, and goes way back too. I mean, they figured out how to do that a long time ago. But the real irony of the situation is that it is colder now during this interglacial period of the Pleistocene Ice Age. There's been 40 of them at least. The ice has advanced and retreated 40 times. There's a graph showing it very clearly from ocean sediment cores that show the first half of it was about 40,000 year cycles, and then it switched suddenly to 100,000 year cycles. That's called Pleistocene conundrum. But regardless, the sea level has gone up and down in the 400-foot range 40 times. And every time the sea goes down 400 feet, all the coral dies that is above 400 feet, right? Just dies and leaves huge caches of limestone behind, because that's mostly what they're made out of. But then when the sea rises from being 400 feet lower, the corals have to grow 400 feet in order to stay at the surface where they need sunlight. So that means that 40 times, 400 feet of coral have been deposited on the bottom of the sea. That's just the coral reefs. That's not all the other shellfish. As I say, coral reefs are thought to account for about 50% of that. So it's colder now than it has been through almost the entire history of life. This is an ice age. It's called the Pleistocene. The people in charge of propaganda are trying to convince us that the ice age ended when the most recent glaciation ended. No, that was one of 40 that have occurred in the Pleistocene. And to all accounts, we are now descending very slowly along the 80,000 year descent into the next glacial maximum. So you don't have to worry about your grandchildren, but it's going to happen way out in the future. That is going to happen. And Canada may well again be completely covered in a mile and more of ice, and people will then have to move. You know, I don't understand why people are so have fun about ice. Why do they think ice is so good? You know, penguins are on it in Antarctica, but they can't find anything to eat there. They have to go in the ocean to get all their food. And they're about the only species that's living there. And you go to the tropical forests and you have the highest biodiversity on Earth. And then what people don't realize is that humans are actually a tropical species. We evolved at the equator, where it was hot all the time. It always has been. And when these cycles happen, the equatorial climate stays relatively the same. It's towards the poles that it cools and heats. And so we came from a place where we could survive without fire, shelter, and clothing. Well, an animal fur on a cool winter night would be useful. But we only came out of Africa because of fire, shelter, and clothing. Fire, control of fire, mostly from wood. Now everybody's against burning wood. They're against burning anything, actually. They are opposed to fire, period. Doesn't matter what it is that's being burnt. And whereas Western Europe has waste to energy, about half of their waste goes to recycling, the stuff that's suitable and economical to recycle. The other half they burn, and 4% of all of Europe's energy comes from that. Yet over here, we dump it in landfills. About 50% of all Canada and the US waste goes to a landfill. And a bunch of the other stuff gets recycled, of course. But we could actually use it. But they're basically against combustion of any kind, of burning organic material. Like the main things are wood, paper, and plastic. They're all of life origin originally. Anything that will burn is of life origin. Otherwise, it would have burnt when the earth was still red hot and wouldn't be here. So all of that is due to natural processes or our manufacturing of plastic from fossil fuels. And the campaign against fossil fuels is just a proxy for the fight against fossil fuels, because that's what they're made from. But you see a protest of plastic. Everybody's in plastic kayaks with plastic paddles, with plastic coats, plastic life jackets, plastic shoes, plastic everything. And that's a protest against plastic. So shake your head.
And so kind of, if we're to boil it down, this is almost a form of like natural energy harvesting, right? Like a mill in a river, or a dam or a geothermal vent, and that they've examined something that is occurring. There is movement, absolute value, right? 0 to 1 or 0 to -1. There's still the absolute value of 1. So what they're doing is taking something that is changing. Can be anything. They're choosing climate. And they're saying this has to stop, and we need to rally the resources of the populace to stop this. And we are the chosen gatekeepers who will stop whatever it is that's moving. It's dragons, it's climate change, it's terrorism, it's whatever. And then Mr. Spencer's expertise is, and then you also have to define everyone who is against this valiant effort as terrorists who need to go to Guantanamo. And when you look at it that way, it's not good. But in terms of just like respecting the game, I mean, that is how you'd rule the world, is just choose a movement, say the movement needs to stop, and denounce everyone opposed to it as evil. Mr. Spencer, what are you smiling about?
I love this. This is mind blowing.
It's fantastic.
Look, it's not just random, like choose something. What did they choose? They hate. See, I've just heard this now. I'm just learning this from Dr. Moore. They hate fire. Now, what's fire but the basis of civilization? The ancient Greeks taught us that with the myth of Prometheus, bringing fire down from the gods, and that's what liberated humanity. And he was punished for it because the gods wanted to keep humanity enslaved and in a primitive state. But fire enabled civilization.
In Dante's Inferno, what's the centermost circle?
Dr. Moore is saying that fire, that combustion is what they hate. And I think, yeah, because they hate civilization. And like we were talking about last time, they hate life. And so they love death. They want to destroy. They've got to go after fire.
Yep. It is the core thing to, I mean, I'm just thinking like kind of like biblically, like what is the centermost circle of hell according to Dante? It's not fire, it's ice. And when Dr. Moore goes, they love ice, I just got the image of like, like Dante's illustration. It's like Satan and he's up to his chest in ice and he's flapping his wings. And it's like, this truly is, in like the most poetic version, it is just an inversion of all that is good. They don't want combustion, and they don't want anything that comes. They don't want no sunlight, no growth, no. It's all evil, and you have to hate yourself, and you have to flagellate yourself. You have to say, "Look how good I am. I don't burn anything. I don't turn on electricity. I don't do anything." And Dr. Moore, as we did in our last episode, kind of shows you like there's nothing to hate. It's not only is it fine, it's beautiful, and they don't want that.
It is so beautiful. The story of the polar bear is one of my favorites because, of course, they're saying the polar bear is going to go extinct because the ice is going to melt and their population is declining. And that's all propaganda. There's no truth in it whatsoever. What they don't tell you is that the polar bear would not exist if it weren't for climate change. Climate change is responsible for the creation of the polar bear. Before this ice age started, about 3 million years ago, the ice started to form. There was no ice on the poles for 250 million years. Since the previous ice age, which lasted 100 million years, this one's only 2.6 million years old, and they're saying it's over. We don't know that. It could go on for another 50 million. But we have shown that we can survive during this. We came through the last major glaciation as human beings. So we can survive, but it will be a completely different situation if we get another glaciation like that. Back to the polar bears. The polar bear is a result of evolution from the Eurasian brown bear, which we call grizzly bear here. They are the same species. But they came from the old world to the new world, just like humans did over the Bering Land Bridge. And now they're on this side. But as soon as the ice came down as far as the north coast of Russia, the brown bears could go out on the ice, and they found that they could hunt seals out there through the breathing holes and the pups of the seals. So, but they're now in a completely different environment, an ice environment. And when a species gets separated into two separate populations, they start to speciate differently. The brown bears remained pretty much like they were 1 million or 2 million years ago, because they're still in the same kind of environment, eating berries and what animals they can catch. But hunting for seals on the ice is like a so different thing. And being white is a smart thing to be on the ice, so they turned white, and they got a more carnivorous diet, and they became half again as big because they're pulling 300-pound seals out of a hole. There wouldn't be a single polar bear in the world if the ice age hadn't come. So we can blame it on climate change. And getting colder is what caused polar bears to happen. If the Earth warms out of this ice age, but it might not be for 1 million or 10 million or 20 million years, we have no idea what causes the ice ages. They have no pattern. They're totally random in their frequency and in their length. The one before the Karoo, which was the 100 million year one, the Silurian ice age, was quite short by comparison. This one, we have no idea when it's going to end. But, you know, take also the coral. Back to the corals again. They say that if it warms, the corals will die. As a matter of fact, the most species of coral are in the warmest ocean in the world. It's the coral triangle. Everybody knows this. It's in biology. It's got 600 species of coral plus, and 2,000 species of reef fish, more than the Great Barrier Reef, more than the Caribbean. It is the richest in the world and is also the warmest ocean in the world. And we know for a fact that over the 50 million years since the Earth cooled out of the Eocene thermal maximum, that was after the dinosaur extinction, the temperature went up to about as high as it's ever been in the history of life, to what we know back to a couple billion years. And so it went up there, all the ice was gone long before that. And then in the last 50 million years, we have been in a 50 million year cooling period with a couple of pauses along the way. And then the Pleistocene ice age comes on. The Caribbean had 2 times as many species of coral during the Eocene thermal maximum as it does now. It's lost half its species because it's cooled. And if it warmed back up to the temperature it was during the Eocene, it would be suitable for twice as many coral species as it is now. So this is a total lie. Corals are a warm water preferring species, and the oceans are colder now than they were during the Eocene thermal maximum or any time after that as it descended in this 50 million year. The graph is there for everyone to see. It's created by sediment cores in the ocean where they can see the layers and they can look at isotopes and they can figure these things out. They're able to do it, and they've done it for all different time scales. And there's no doubt about it that this is one of the coldest periods in the history of the Earth right now, and it's going to get colder again if the pattern that is now shaping up the last 5,000 years, with the Minoan warm period 3,000 years ago being warmer than the Roman warm period, being warmer than the medieval warm period, and now we're have just finished coming through the little ice age And for the last 300 years, we've been gaining back a little bit of warmth, like about 1.2 degrees Celsius. And they're saying that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming is going to be a climate catastrophe. That's less than the difference between the average temperature of New York and Washington, D.C., never mind the equator, right? There's people living at the equator, you know, guys, and there's people living in Northwest Territories in Alaska. And how do they think, what's it going to do? You know, is the whole world going to be one big hurricane that lasts for 20 years or something? No, it's not. There's been no increase in the frequency of hurricanes. There's been a vast decrease in the incidence of people dying from severe weather because we build our buildings better and we have warning systems of when these things are coming. When those, I forget how many, did 10,000 people die in the hurricane in Texas around 1890 or something? But they didn't know it was coming. Nobody did. So they weren't even prepared for it. Now there's a 4 days warning and people can evacuate in their electric cars and the battery runs out and then everybody can't go anywhere. We don't want that to happen. Change the subject.
I want to see Dr. Moore fight Greta Thunberg in a cage ring. I think that would be great. But so here's, and someone can fact check me on this, but as far as I'm aware, and this is per Richard Rhodes' book, Energy, humanity's never moved to a less dense energy source, right? From timber to coal to petroleum to fission to fusion. We've never gone backwards. This whole idea of we have to move to renewables, and I'm all for energy independence and innovation and all that, go for it. But back to the very disliking of fire itself, and thus the hatred of the blossoming of civilization. It seems like that is just yet another branch, is to move to, it's like banning, like a fully automatic weapon to just like a semi-auto. Then you got to get rid of the semi-auto, just a pistol, get rid of the pistol, just a knife, we're slowly moving backwards. It's got to be windmills. It's got to be solar. And the net effect is less and less energy source, less and less human growth and innovation. And I think, Mr. Spencer, you can maybe touch on this, is it seems to all stem back to, and I hate to simplify it, a general hatred or repulsion or opposition to all things human.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's what it is. And yeah, you're right. It's a regression that we're looking at that will be irreversible. Once they get rid of the internal combustion engine and we all have electric cars, and then the electric cars don't work and can't be recharged, and there's not enough energy to charge them anyway. And so then we go back to horses or whatever, and we're stuck in our 15-minute cities because there's no way for transportation on any serious level. These things are irreversible. And then the scam will be eventually obvious to everyone, and it'll be too late. But this seems to be something that the people who are doing this have consciously chosen. And that's unprecedented as far as I know in human history. There have been periods of regression before, and periods of depopulation. The plague hit the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, in the 6th century, and recurred several times after that. And the population was decimated. The population in the Roman Empire was higher in the 5th century than it was in the 10th. And you had a concomitant recession of civilization to a certain degree. The educational level lowered. The cities were largely depopulated. You would go to Constantinople and there would be whole neighborhoods and whole districts that had once been thriving that were just empty and overgrown because there simply weren't as many people as there had been. And the general level of everything in civilization lowered because these things, of course, advance by dint of human achievement. And if there aren't as many humans, they're not achieving. And so everything regresses. But I don't know of any time when this has been consciously chosen by this sinister cabal that we have today that is trying to push this on us. That happened because the plague happened and they didn't know how to deal with it. And it's the same thing when you look at ancient Greece, and Socrates was teaching and Plato was his disciple and Aristotle was there and Aristophanes was making fun of them. But try to name some guys from 100 years later. They're all gone. You didn't have that level of intellectual exploration anymore. But that also was due to a variety of factors that were not self-induced. And it's extraordinary that we have a group of people in a complex and advanced civilization who are determined to destroy it and set us all back to a level from an earlier period. But that's what we're dealing with.
Well, the war against nitrogen fertilizer is perhaps the most pernicious one of all.
All right.
The nitrogen is about 70% of, nearly 80% of the atmosphere, and 79, I think. So it's most of the atmosphere. But nitrogen is a very neutral element. It does not combine with other elements easily. And for an example, in a combustion chamber of a car where you have very high heat, that's what NOx comes out. So nitrogen will combine with oxygen in the combustion chamber, but that doesn't happen naturally. It's the nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil that make it possible for plants to get nitrogen. Otherwise, they can't take it from the air directly, even though it's nearly 80% of the air, because it won't make any reactions with anything that's in the plants. So the nitrogen fixing bacteria have figured out how to take nitrogen and turn it in to nitrogen compound. So that is a natural fertilization situation, which hardly anybody even knows about. All the legumes, for example, the peas and the beans and those kind of things, they are all nitrogen fixers because they have place in their roots where the bacteria are given a home. They make little nodules so the bacteria can go in there and have a home. The bacteria give nitrogen to the plant, and the plant gives sugar to the nitrogen, which is their food, and they use that to make the nitrogen compounds. So it's one of the most important reactions in the whole of life. But of course, we wouldn't want to teach children these things. And then of course, the nitrogen fertilizer was created in the early 1900s, and then later, about 1930, it became something you could get a big bag of. And a Haber-Bosch process. Haber got the Nobel Prize for figuring out how to make ammonia from nitrogen and natural gas. That's where the hydrogen in the ammonia comes from. And carbon dioxide is emitted in this process. That's one of the reasons they say we shouldn't be doing it anymore. And Bosch he was an engineer. Bosch got a Nobel Prize for scaling it up to an industrial level so we could have millions of tons of nitrogen fertilizer. And if it weren't for the nitrogen fertilizer, there would be no more than 4 billion of us. In other words, half the human population is here because the nitrogen fertilizer makes the crops grow so much more abundant. And that is a fact. And they're saying we should get rid of that. And the unfortunate thing is these people who say there's too many people are not willing to go first. A world where there weren't any people who thought there were too many people would be a much nicer place to be than one that has all these people who think there's too many people. And what is wrong with them? Their thinking is illogical. If they wish to help, they should off themselves and set an example for the other people who don't like people.
Yeah.
And then we could all be happy and do the things we need to do, like build more nuclear power plants. They're the ones who don't like nuclear power too. I mean, yeah. And it isn't even fire, but it's sort of like fire, but it's pretty cool like fire. And the breeder reactor, which Russia has already built 2 of and is building another one, and China's building one. They bought the patent from Russia. Russia is the most advanced in nuclear technology of any country. But China and India are both building nuclear plants at a pretty rapid rate now too. And but These breeder reactors, what they do is, it's sort of like in the Bible, there's the parable of the loaves and fishes, where Jesus feeds a multitude with one fish and 4 loaves of bread.
Yeah.
That's what nuclear energy is, because uranium-235 is the only fissile isotope in the world. No other isotope can be taken and used to make nuclear energy. But in a reactor, like, and uranium-235 is only 0.7% of natural uranium. So it isn't even 1%. It's only less than 1% of the natural uranium can actually be used to make a nuclear reaction. But during that nuclear reaction, the uranium-238, which is in there with the uranium-235, is transformed from a fertile isotope to a fissile isotope. Fertile means can be made into a fissionable thing in a reactor. So we can turn all that 99.3% of the uranium into plutonium-239, which is what the Russians are running that reactor with, and France uses some of it too. So it makes more than 100 times more fuel available than if you only use the 235. But then there is thorium. Now people talk about thorium reactors. Thorium is not fissile. You cannot make a nuclear reaction with thorium. It first has to be converted in a reactor that's now running either on uranium-238 or plutonium-239, converted into uranium-233, which is fissile. And there is 6 or 8 times as much thorium as there is uranium. So now we have multiplied the amount of fuel by 1,000. Right. And there's already a lot of uranium-235 to last for a long time. But all of these other isotopes, of which there are vastly amounts more, can be converted. So this is an energy source that will run into the thousands of years of the future. And we could replace 50% of the fossil fuels we're using with nuclear energy in 50 years, easily. And I think that's a good thing, because fossil fuels are very precious, and we're using them for things that you don't need to use fossil fuels for. Like heating a home can be done with electricity, right? And well, actually, almost anything that happens in a building can be done with electricity. The heat, the air conditioning, the appliances, the hot water, all of that can be done with electricity. So you can basically, and buildings are somewhere between 30 and 40% of our entire energy use in the world. You know, more than cars, more than transport. And transport is where we need to, anything that moves at long distances, well, not anything, because boats could all be nuclear powered, big ships. If you can take 100 nuclear missiles underwater in a nuclear powered submarine for 3 months at a time, you can probably put a nuclear propulsion in an oil tanker or a cargo ship. Of course you can. And running nuclear isn't that complicated. It's no more complicated than running a diesel engine, once you have the technical ability to do it and look at the screens and make sure everything's working right. You know, once they're built, they're not that hard to operate. And we've got nuclear operators. There's over 100 nuclear reactors being operated between Canada and the US here. And the number of nuclear warships there are, especially submarines, but also aircraft carriers and you know, all kinds of them. And the whole Russian ice-breaking fleet, 6 big boats, are all nuclear powered, because then they don't have to refuel them when they go up there for the winter and spend their whole winter up there.
Yeah,
they don't have to that fuel lasts the whole year, maybe more. I don't know how long it lasts actually, but it lasts a lot longer than a tank of diesel fuel. And the whole, there's so many things that could be done to make the energy system better. And then now they're building 1,500 wind turbines, or want to, off the east coast of New York and Virginia and down that way. And the whales are dying four times faster than they were before. They're washing up on the beach, and dolphins too. And they're doing these sonar surveys with a sound. Whales are an acoustic species. You can't see very far in the ocean, but with sound you can see a lot further and talk to each other. It's hard to talk underwater, if you may have noticed when you take your scuba mask off. And so they want to build these. Greenpeace is on the side of the wind machines. They're saying there's no proof that the whales will be hurt. I went out on 4 expeditions into the Pacific, the deep Pacific, against the Russian whaling fleets, and we stopped the killing of 30,000 whales a year. And here now the board of directors of Greenpeace is basically taking the side of non-renewable machines over life. Like when they say wind and solar are renewable, yes, the wind is renewable and the sun is renewable, but the machines aren't. The solar panels are not renewable. You know, renewable, our food, all our food is renewable. That's organic. That's different than a wind turbine is not organic. It's made with huge amounts of concrete and metal and fiberglass. And they can't even figure out a way to recycle the blades. They bury them in the ground.
Yeah.
You know, and I've always said that all the wind and solar technology, all the infrastructure should have to be built with wind and solar energy. All the mining of the metals and stuff that is used. I bet there wouldn't be any energy left over. And this, but let me tell one more fact that is absolutely outstandingly ridiculous. Okay, the wind and solar is only available at the best a third of the time on average between the two of them. Of course, the solar is not available for half the day, which is the night. And in the late morning, in the early morning and late evening, there's not much coming out of it either. It's only when it's in a cone like this that you get I have a solar house for 23 years in Baja, Mexico, but they're at sunshine about 320 days a year. And so it's just a house. It's not a whole city with factories.
Yeah.
And so when the wind and solar are working, when else can you charge the batteries? But when the wind and solar is working. So not only do you have to supply the entire supply of electricity for the city and the industries, but you have to charge the batteries, which is 2 times more. So it's 3 times as much capacity must be built in order to have somewhat guaranteed electricity 24/7. It's still, but if you start looking at the cost of the batteries, you're starting to, like, it's the whole GDP of the United States kind of thing. So it is technically and economically impossible to do what they say we should do. And that is why, Robert, I'm sure that's the reason why you are saying that this is going to be a disaster and set civilization back. And we may have actually billions of people die. If we do what they say, that's what would occur. All right, I'll shut up for a bit.
Tommy,
Okay,
isn't that
that's
what we
great.
were talking about last time? They want millions of people to die.
Yeah.
And they believe that there's some climate, or at least they want us to believe that they think there's some climate catastrophe that's happening that they can stave off, but that the world would really be better off if there were billions fewer people in it. And so it makes me wonder, you know, hearing all this and most of it for the very first time, it makes me wonder how long this campaign has gone on, because nuclear energy, of course, has a terrible reputation, and it goes back to decades before. I remember, you know, when I was in high school in the 70s, hearing about how dangerous it was. And then there was the movie right around that time with Jack Lemmon.
China syndrome.
China syndrome. Thank you. 3 Mile Island, right? The meltdown, and everybody got afraid about nuclear energy. And it seems to me that a piece like that has a tremendous cultural influence in manipulating people into thinking that this is something that has to be stopped, and that nobody's making a movie about the whales being killed by solar energy. And nobody is talking about that in the popular culture, of course, quite obviously, because the people who want to bring all this about are also in charge of the entertainment industry. But if there were such a presentation, then it would change a lot of people's minds, to be sure.
I kind of have been developing a running theory or doctrine to live by, and it's just that Eisenhower was right. If Eisenhower says be wary of the military industrial complex, be wary of it. If Eisenhower says we need atoms for peace so that we may power the globe, Eisenhower was right. So just go back to him. Whatever he was saying and whoever hates him, go the opposite direction. But it's like was it last summer when all those illegal immigrants were bussed up to Martha's Vineyard and we saw just how quickly they could remove them, right? But we can't do anything when there's a million coming over the southern border, and you see that they can, if they really want to, do something about it. That's kind of how I feel with nuclear energy. If they really truly feared what was going on, we'd have we'd make the COVID stimulus look peanuts. We'd be a nuclear reactor in every city, and we'd have them upside down and backwards. There'd be a crash program, colleges for free if you go and do nuclear research. We'd have you'd see propaganda. It'd be in the movies. Every Marvel movie would somehow end with the construction of a nuclear reactor. I don't even know. They would just do it. Toy Story, it'd be whatever. There'd be memes. It'd be the new Ukraine flag. It'd be like the cooling tower. But we don't have that. And that shows me that they don't believe their own bullshit.
Yep.
Not one person has been killed by a nuclear reactor in North America, and there's over 100 of them running for 50 years plus. Not one person. You know, the oil and gas industry has way more fatalities. Well, actually, there aren't any except Chernobyl. That was the only nuclear accident that caused death. And that was because they did a stupid experiment by telling the operators to shut off the safety systems. And it was built with what's called it's
RBMK.
Yeah, the RBMK, yes. But that design was a cheap design for making plutonium for nuclear weapons, and they cookie cutter it all over the former Soviet Union as power reactors. But it had the unfortunate possibility of becoming a nuclear explosion. And that's what happened when they took the safety systems off. That was actually a nuclear explosion. It blew a 2,000-ton concrete top off the reactor, and it took 10 days to put it out. And the firefighters are the ones that died. They were right in there in the core, right? 3 Mile Island didn't kill even injure anybody slightly. And nobody died from radiation at Fukushima. 2 engineers died from the tsunami when it came ashore. And not only that, that was the stupidest things they designed there at Fukushima. They put the reactor 8 feet above sea level in a place where they knew there'd been tsunamis before. And then they put the backup generators to run the pumps to keep the cooling water going through while the fission products decayed to a cool enough level that you didn't have to cool it anymore. That's about 4 or 5 days. And they put them on skids in front of the reactors. They weren't even nailed down. They could have put them in bunkers up the hill and had underground wires to the pumps, and everything would have been fine. But they lost all their outside power. They lost their nuclear power. And then the pump started, and 1 hour later, the tsunami hit and washed them all away. And then they let those hydrogen explosions happen in the coverings over the reactors. They could have easily broke the glass there and let the hydrogen out so it didn't explode. But they didn't. So it looked really horrific. And I remember when CNN had a headline come up with the news that said, "Nuclear crisis deepens as bodies wash ashore," right? As if the nuclear crisis had caused the 20,000 deaths, when in fact it was the tsunami, not the nuclear accident was due to a natural event where things were put in places they shouldn't have been. You know,
if CNN had their druthers, it would have been fossil fuel kills 3,000 in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. Like, I mean, like and you know how again that they're not pointing out like what really happened at Chernobyl is because the fault is not in nuclear fission, it's in communism, which is another thing they don't want you to point the flaws out in. So it's like, no, that one was fun. Well, if they can say that wasn't real communism, how come we can't say that wasn't real nuclear power? It's a double standard. But if they wanted to, we'd be on nuclear power. So, I mean, it really is almost, I mean, there is a spiritual aspect to it. Like, go forth and multiply. To those that have, like, more will be given. Like, that is fission 235, 238. It's there. I mean, think about Moore's law, the doubling of the number of transistors on a silicon wafer every 18 months. They always think it's never going to do it again. We're coming up on this one, and we can't possibly go past this. The most you'll ever have is a Sony Walkman. And then some new free market thing breaks through it, and now we're there, and I'm on an M1 iMac, and it's already outdated, and we're going to keep moving forward. But think of the transistors on the wafer as human beings on Earth. Well, why do you want more transistors? Well, so you can do more computing power, and I now have at my fingertips what the president didn't have in the 60s. More people, and as Mr. Spencer said, more people, more innovation. Well, we want more transistors, people on this silicon wafer, the Earth. We want more and more and more. And once we start to hit this limit of like, I don't know how they're going to get the market forces or the human forces of survival will push through something. The Haber process, what vertical farms, penicillin. If you push it far enough, natural selection will create, the necessity is the mother of invention. And as Dr. Vince Houghton says, in desperation's the drunk uncle. Like it will get done, but they don't want it to. And you almost have to, is it, you don't want more people, you don't want more innovation. Why don't you want more innovation? You don't want the thing to keep going forward and explore the cosmos. It seems like they want to contain it, much like you should contain a pathogen at a BSL-4 lab. They don't want humanity to grow. They want to remove like microbiology. You want to remove the agar. You want to remove the sunlight. You got to go much deeper and start asking a philosophical question. Why is that? Is it self-hatred? Is it sin? Is it I'm ugly and I can't be made better? There is some deeply philosophical thing.
I've always thought self-loathing was a big part of it.
I think it is.
They're projecting their loathing of themselves on the rest of the population, I think.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. We are not, and instead of going, yeah, I suck, let's hit the gym tomorrow. Let's maybe not eat French fries tonight. Instead of that optimistic of like, let's get after it. It's this whole I'm fat and ugly, and therefore you are, and I'm gonna blow up this building. Instead of being like, hey, bro, let's just hit the gym tomorrow. Let's maybe not get Taco Bell tonight. Like, there isn't that. It's a deep, deep thing. And why is it that the people who are at the reins of power, why do they feel that? I don't know. Maybe that's what happens when you reach the apex. Is it's not as fulfilling as you want. It's like, why is a millionaire like miserable? They're in a penthouse with everything they want, but they don't. I don't know, but it's a deeply, and it's what Mr. Spencer and I touched on last time. I hate to write it off as this simple, but I mean, it kind of just seems like good versus evil, like hatred versus love and growth. And I can't really boil it down anymore. Mr. Spencer, could you maybe drop a comment on that? Could you bail me out as I'm rambling?
I think you're absolutely right. I'm completely in agreement. I tell you, I have a problematic relationship with religion, with Christianity, really with Christians, not with Christianity. It's a funny thing because I've had a lot of bad experiences with the church, and I'm not meaning to get into any of that.
Sure.
But the point is that I would have been very happy to say goodbye to all of it at many points. But at the same time, it seems to me that what we're up against right now is indeed something eschatological, something that has to do with be fruitful and multiply and the God of life versus people who hate God and hate life. And that's really the lines are being drawn, and that's where it is. And so, like it or not, this is the thing that makes sense of the world in a way that I can't find anything else that makes sense of it better.
It is kind of something you got to hang your hat. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there are these kind of core ideas. Yeah,
Well, I would argue with you that they're all the same.
well, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at.
Islam is in that. I think Islam is on the other side and loves death.
Okay, all right. Well, the point I'm making is this:
why the elites like it so much.
Yeah, probably is because it
aligns with their pro-death perspective.
All right, well, let's remove that from what I said.
Another story for another day.
We'll remove that one from what I said. Everything else, but there are these kind of like core ideas. Okay, but everything else is good, right? It's like multiply, take care of the old, more and more build and pass on. And it is just this fruitful, loving, like sunlight and, grassy fields and merry and holidays and feast. And it's just like, just this love and gregariousness versus like, no, you'll own nothing. There will be no feasting. You will live in your pod. You will eat your bug, and you will hate yourself because
Yeah, you'll hate yourself. You'll think if I were only a woman, then everything would be all right. So I'll mutilate myself and take hormones and be at war with my own body for the rest of my life, and that'll fix it. Now, see, only somebody who hates creation could ever have thought that, and who doesn't trust in the creator.
it is
Because otherwise you would think, well, I am what I am and I'll make the best of it, for better or worse. And so it's ultimately a spiritual problem.
Yeah.
Well, it's a spiritual problem, but on the other hand, they say there's a devil.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, apparently there is supposed to be some bad devil that God can't defeat like in 5 seconds, which he should be able to do if he's all powerful. And so many of these narratives are to me are more like fairy tales than they are like really looking at the actual, what we actually do know about the situation. And I think creation is God. I don't think they're two different things.
Okay.
And we know so little. If you just take this one thing, like what I say about energy, without energy, there is no motion, right? Everything goes frozen. Everything is still. And without motion, there is no time. Because if everything stays the same and never changes, how could you measure time? Time is measured by change. And like how many years it takes the sun to do things and stuff. So I don't pretend. And I think, I don't know why a lot of people use the language of religion as their philosophical base. Okay, if you want to have a sort of spiritual dream about what is real and what it isn't, about God and creation and whether Jesus was real and all these things, I don't do that. I respect other people. I do not ever criticize a person's religious beliefs.
Sure.
I talk about it with them, but I would never demean it, because they have a perfect right as a human being to believe whatever they want. And if they can't figure out a sensible thing and they have something nonsense, that's a problem. But I'm not going to criticize them. I'm just going to, maybe I'll say, but.
Yeah.
And
it's nonsense and it doesn't make any sense and it's stupid, but I'm not going to criticize.
I would never say that.
Yeah.
I think you're great. I love everything that you're saying. On this we disagree. I think we're coming up to the end of the hour and we could talk about it maybe at another time. But it seems to me there are a lot of people who are thoughtful and far more intelligent than I am who are theists. And so I don't really have any problem with that. I don't know that it's a matter of wanting to embrace some silly fairy tale because you're not smart enough to figure anything else out. Actually, like I was saying, I would love to get away from it, but I come back to it because it seems to me that these fairy tales and myths actually make more sense of the world than anything else. But I'm not asking you to accept that. And I think it would be a large discussion that we might be able to fruitfully have another time.
That
I'd love. We all agree that there's a movement that is very much against life and all that is good, and it is very much powerful these days for whatever reason.
Yes, and I think that's what we should all be focusing on, as to whether we're a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever. I personally, I think that's a personal thing. I don't care too much for people standing on the street corner trying to, make you read their booklet. And my opinion on that, I came from a family where my mother is an avowed atheist. In other words, there is no theology. Is a story rather than what it really exists. And my dad was more of an agnostic. And I've grown up with studying the philosophy of the European existentialist Bertrand Russell, the British and his group, I came to realize that religion had a lot to do with politics, and
What about
so I don't really go there. I look around at the world and see what I see, and learn what I learn,
whoops?
and want to stay with that. Not to tell people that I know something that they don't know, and that I can see the truth. Statements like that. I don't do that. I actually use concrete examples of everything, and I can't see God, and maybe and why is it a he? And very basic things like that. And is there really a devil? And if so, why doesn't God burn him?
I
Or something?
I think the point we're all reaching is autonomy, kind of, you do you, I'll do me.
Yep.
And whether we are looking at it in a biblical sense, or we're looking at it as gross GDP, or we're looking at it as total watts of power being produced, be it Dante's Inferno or just an ice age or whatever we want to call it, we all can label different ways and have our own beliefs and all that good stuff. I think we're all in agreement with that.
Yep.
It depends on, I think we're all looking at one thing is, call them the devil. You can call them globalists. You can call them green energy people, whatever you want. Call them Greta. And then the other side. And it just seems to be.
Did you say Greta?
I did. It seems to be whatever you want, religious, atheist, whatever. It seems to be growth, flourishing, general merriment, enjoyment of life versus self-hatred and self-loathing. If we want to call it a religion or a science, that's I think that's for the personal, but I think we're all agreement in this. Self-love really versus self-loathing. And I know I told Mr. Spencer I'd let him go, so I know I'm keeping you late.
Yeah, sorry, I got to run.
And I know we'll get it. We'll wrap this one up.
Fun though, and very great to meet you, Dr. Moore. Wonderful things. I learned an immense amount, and I much appreciate it.
And I appreciate your knowledge base, because I don't mean to discredit anything that people really believe is.
Yeah, sure.
If it's on the side of good,
maybe some other time we can get into that. I don't know if this is the show for it, but
yeah, no. I think that would be a cool another episode, guys. If you want to go to the description, including you, Mr. Spencer, if you want to get Dr. Moore's book, it's a great book, guys. If you want to go follow Mr. Spencer, please go follow him. His Twitter's in the description.
I got books too. Buy my books.
All the link, everything's in there. I got you. Buy the books. Go forth and multiply. That's not just for green. That also means spend that cheddar, guys. All right. Fossil fuel and money makes the world go around. All right. It's not all just feel good. But guys, let's wrap this one up. Dr. Moore, Mr. Spencer, I'd love to have you guys on again. That was fucking great. I love it. You both are so
a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, love yourself. No self-loathing. Go forth and multiply. And just, the devil's a fucking loser. All right, guys. Much love. Thank you so much.